that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 435th, make that edition of Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell.
I'm not in the flesh today.
This is the virtual
I
Tom
am,
Fennell.
but the flesh is in a different location.
Well, what happened was last night I woke up and I had a runny nose and a tickle in my throat, and nothing was terrible, but I don't want to go into the studio with symptoms, and the fact of the matter is, you go into BCTV, you got to sign a thing that says I don't have any symptoms, and
you got symptoms.
I got symptoms, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to lie about this, and especially because just a little fib in a case like this could wind up with somebody being really sick or even dying, which is something I'd prefer not to happen among my friends. Okay, every day I get up and I do my energy blog work at geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com, and find news items relating to energy and climate change and put them up online at that blog. And also I take a few of them and put them up for the Energy Week TV show that Tom and I do. And if you look down on the screen,
same links, two different places.
Yeah, if you look down on the screen, you'll find ways to download or view online the script that we use. And if you do that,
these are pretty good. Some of these are worth checking. So
absolutely,
that's how you get it. You look up your blog.
Yeah, or go to those links, and then you can find the item that we're talking about, and that will have a link to the original article. And so, do we have more to say, Tom, about that?
Well, you talked about your nose running. Did you know that if your nose runs and your feet smell, you're built upside down?
I didn't know that. I can tell you one thing, and that is sometimes my shoes hurt. And if I put them in the closet, they start to feel lonely. Okay. We're both great comics. I got to tell you, it's amazing that we're not in Las Vegas making money. Okay. Our first item, and I'm going to go to the first picture now, which is up on the screen. Our first item is from CNN, and it's about air pollution.
I thought it was about elephants.
Well, that one cloud coming out of whatever that smokestack is does look kind of like an elephant with a trunk, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Biggest one there. Yeah. Okay. What do you got for a title for this thing?
Air pollution is cutting more years from people's lives than smoking, war, or HIV/AIDS.
Yeah.
Wow.
Air pollution is taking years from billions of people's lives around the world and is a greater threat to life expectancy than smoking, HIV/AIDS, or war. A report says in India, air pollution reduces life expectancy by an average of 5.9 years. And I got news for you. That applies
9 years in some of the cities.
Yeah, that applies to people who are wealthy and to people who are poor.
Yeah.
This is something that applies to everybody. And in Vermont, according to an MIT study that we've talked about before, there's about 300 people who die from problems that develop that are exacerbated by air pollution every year. That means almost one person a day.
And the smoke is coming from Ohio.
Yeah, Pennsylvania, Ontario, wherever it comes from our own vehicles, on our own roads, from people driving polluting trucks and buses, and you name it. And
in many countries, people are losing on the average 2 years of their lives.
Yes, although the United States is better in this respect than a lot of countries.
It's better that we're not losing 2 years. We're talking about like India.
Well, in India, it's really bad, but yeah, in China, it's bad, and then there's a bunch of other places that some of them are kind of surprising. But there are places in Africa that are very difficult for air pollution.
Well, the takeaway here is air pollution is driven primarily by the use and production of fossil fuels.
Yes.
We got to stop burning them.
Yes. If we can get rid of the fossil fuels, we can stop two things simultaneously. One of them is climate change. The other is a lot of sickness, huge amount of sickness. So, got more?
Not on that one. Let's move on.
Oh, a little air pollution here, except this air pollution is coming from a forest burning down. This is from CNN. What do you have here?
Coming hours are make or break for Lake Tahoe Resort City.
Yeah, I think Lake Tahoe, South Lake Tahoe, which is what they were worrying about, actually survived. Firefighters have been able to make some headway against the Caldor fire around South Lake Tahoe, and the popular California tourist town, with luck, may be spared from flames if conditions on Wednesday night, now this is past Wednesday, and I didn't hear that this town burned down, so I imagine it's still there. If they remain favorable, a fire official said. One problem that they've got, though, is that people go to Lake Tahoe partly because the forest is beautiful. And
I saw some pictures of the area. That whole area is beautiful.
yeah, oh yeah, it's a beautiful area. But when a forest is burned down, it's not beautiful anymore. It's going to take them a while to recover back to where they were. And
well, from the article,
yeah,
more than 50,000 people have been placed under evacuation orders.
Yes, that's right. That's a problem for people, isn't it?
Been almost 7,000 fires this season.
Well, the last time I looked, the amount of the area of out west that had caught fire was about half the size of Vermont.
Yeah.
This is, we're not kidding around here.
That's exactly about right. About half of Vermont.
Yeah, and this is not. We're not joking around about this. And when they say that the fire is not at all under control, that's what they mean. It's spreading without reference to them. And the one thing that I keep coming back to is people don't realize how difficult this whole thing is under bad circumstances. The Peshtigo fire jumped Green Bay, which is the equivalent.
Yes,
it's the equivalent of a fire jumping Lake Champlain from New York to Vermont.
I think it's greater than that even.
Well, in part of Green Bay, it's greater, and in part it's actually a little less. But these never take any make any assumptions about being able to stop a fire. These things are.
They go where they want to go, baby.
Absolutely, and you got to work very hard to move them into a little box where they will burn themselves out. This is kind of a force of nature. It's kind of like the tide and the waves and hurricane winds and so forth. So you want to go on, Tom?
Yeah, we got a picture of Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty picture, isn't it?
It is. It's kind of nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you have for title?
LA City Council votes to have city transition to 100% renewable energy by 2035.
Yeah.
They're moving in the right direction.
I think so. This is from mynewsla.com. The Los Angeles City Council voted to have the Department of Water and Power, the largest municipal utility in the country, transition to 100% renewable energy by 2035, as well as develop a long-term hiring plan for nearly 10,000 green jobs. So this is a plan that's going to put a lot of jobs in. By the way, they had already decided that they were going to go to 100% renewable energy. This 2035 plan just makes that happen, I think, 10 years early.
Well, my note says a decade.
A decade. Okay, good. So I wasn't, my mind hasn't turned to mush yet.
Well,
Okay.
it has, but I wasn't going to mention that.
Oh, okay. We are up to Friday, September 3rd, unless you've got more to say about that, Tom.
No, we got a picture of a flooded garage.
Yeah, we have a picture of a place where a lot of people are going to be very sad if they like their cars.
Well, virtually every car on the lowest level of that garage has got to be junked.
We would hope that people moved them, but I kind of think that they didn't.
They probably put the car in there thinking it was safe.
They might have done that. Yes, absolutely. So what do you have for a title for this?
At least 46 people have died after floodwaters from Ida's remnants swamped cities from Virginia to New England.
Yeah. This is, I've lost this. Here we go. This is, I'm having a senior moment here. This is from CNN. At least 46 people have died in 6 eastern states, Connecticut, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, after the storm brought unprecedented rainfall to some areas. There were 23 known deaths in New Jersey. That's more than there were in Louisiana.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, the people in Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina figured out that they had not really planned well enough. So they made a whole bunch of changes in the way things were done, building up levees and things like that. And they did a fairly good job of it. This was a bad hurricane. And I think that they did a commendable job. But that hurricane did not get back over water, and it made things really difficult for New York and New Jersey.
It just sat still and rained.
Yeah, and you know, I looked at pictures of this, and one of the pictures that I came across was a picture of an entrance to a subway. And from the street level, you could only go down about 2 steps before you hit water.
I saw that picture.
Amazing. And you probably saw that picture of the water gushing into the subway station.
That one I didn't, but
oh man, it was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
But as you might expect, subways are very susceptible to flood damage.
Well, water
and
tends
they've
to
allowed for that. They got pumps all over the place, but this exceeded their ability to move the water.
Yeah. And of course, one of the problems, and this has been a problem in various places in China this year, subway trains, if it all happens too fast, subway trains can be between stations and short out and not be movable. And then people are caught in the subway.
And that happened in New York.
Yeah.
It did. They had to sit there in the train. Well, what they did in New York, they shut the power off on the trains.
Yeah.
Which was, I think, they had to do.
They had to. They didn't have a choice.
People would sit there in the trains and the lights are out, and they're sitting there wondering, when the heck am I going to get home?
And they wound up having, in many cases, to stand on the seats in order to
There's
get
a
out
picture
of
of them standing on the seats. Yes.
Yeah.
The water. That was a bus, I think.
Oh, was it?
The
Okay.
water was right up to the seats. The people standing on the seats to keep them getting wet.
Man. Well, and
Central Park in New York recorded its wettest hour on record at over 3 inches.
Yes.
And the park's total rainfall, more than 7, was the 5th highest single day total ever.
Yeah.
And in addition, you didn't need flooding alone. 8 tornadoes hit the Northeast.
Well, there's people should become used to it, because this is what the new normal is.
Well, the last sentence in the article says storms like Ida reflect climate change realities and the need to address them.
Yeah, we should probably go on to the next.
We could do that. What we got there looks like a modern art painting, doesn't it?
It does. That's
a photograph.
That's a photograph, and it looks like the Twilight Zone or something. It's really disturbing. And this particular one is from CNN, and it addresses what we were just talking about.
This is a good article if you want to look one up. This is a very good article.
It's a little depressing, but
climate scientists quote, "This is a dystopian moment."
Yes.
Duh.
And the guy says, I'm a climate scientist. My colleagues and I have been warning for years that human-induced global warming will bring us to a future of faster and more furious extreme weather events. Now, the events are coming with such speed and ferocity that the moment can be called dystopian. And this is something that was, going through the news in the last week or the last couple of weeks. I hit this over and over again. The scientists who had been predicting that this would happen were appalled at how fast it was coming.
You're taking them by surprise.
Yeah.
Well, the article says the problem is solvable. We, the human species, have what it takes to modify our energy system.
Yeah, but we're fighting against.
Let me finish what I'm going to say because it hits the truth.
Yes, go ahead.
Many among us, including those in positions of great power, don't want to do those things.
Yeah. And I'm sorry I was interrupting you, Tom.
With the retrograde faction as powerful as it is in our national politics, we're supposed to solve the climate problem?
Well, we have to solve the climate problem. It's not a matter of choice. The sooner
it's going to solve itself, and people are going to die.
Yes, that's right. The sooner we get into it, the harder we work, the better it's going to be. And the fact of the matter is, this is something that if we do it properly, people are going to be able to make good livings working on this in a very, very satisfying manner. There's going to be big challenges. We've got to address those challenges one way or the other. We can address them in a way that's foolish, or we can address them in a way that's wise. And, that's what it is.
Well, as we've spoken here on the show, mechanics on these turbines make good money.
They make good money, yeah. And, the thing that I met a young woman about 2 weeks ago in the library, because I stopped by the library on the way to the studio a lot, particularly in hot weather, because the library is air conditioned. And, I just hang out there for a few minutes. And I met a young woman there who told me that she was working on a master's degree on forestry. And I just said, if I were young and learning in school, I think that is one of very few places where I would be attracted to, because there is so much that we can do with forestry, with agriculture is another one, geology, biology. There's a whole sequence of things here, this whole series of things that you can look at and say, yes, there is valuable work that can be done there, doing research and development. And I'm thinking specifically about Peter Andrews and his work in Australia on natural sequence farming, where they're kind of allowing the water to flow, but they're kind of keeping it slow.
We've talked about that
many times. And it's just fascinating what can be done that we're not doing, that will make things better for everybody.
Part of the problem is that many of the farms that used to be small have been bought up, and now they're huge farms, and the people who own them don't want to do anything but exploit the land.
Well, yes, and they unfortunately are required to do that by their corporate charters. Their job is to make money for the stockholder, regardless of what damage they do.
Unfortunately, yes.
So, should we go on, Tom?
Interesting picture coming up. No, I'm getting tired of talking about that.
I don't blame you. Yeah, we've got a picture.
This is an interesting graph.
Yes.
The average value of U.S. solar photovoltaic module shipments in dollars per peak watt, and it's done nothing but go down.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's gone down from $1.96 per peak watt in 2010 to 38 cents in 2020.
Yeah. And it's still going down. And not Moore's law, but Wright's law, which is a standard law of economics that most economists have never heard of, says that it will continue to go down. And
absolutely. Well, we're making technical progress, and then Moore's law is in effect. And these things are, you look at the map, at the graph, that's just steady down.
Yes.
And it's going to continue going down, but slowly, more slowly.
So what have you got for a title? This is from Clean Technica.
Solar activity was at a record high level in the USA in 2020.
In the US, solar PV module shipments rose to 21.8 million peak kilowatts of solar power capacity in 2020, by far their best ever. In fact, it was 5.4 million peak kilowatts above 2019's total, the previous best. Now, that means that it's been an increase of about a third.
As long as solar continues to be the cheapest source of power, and it is,
yeah,
that's going to continue.
Absolutely. Rooftop solar installations grew, but larger installations grew even more. So the rooftop solar on people's homes and businesses and so forth grew impressively, but the big growth was out in the field. And I want to point out once more, we've said it before, the fact that a solar PV array goes up over agricultural land does not mean that the agriculture has to stop.
Well, people have to become aware of that, because it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And it certainly is the future. I mean, you can't grow corn under a PV, but you can grow potatoes.
Yeah, and you can grow hay. You can grow
and they do quite well.
Grass for sheep to graze on. You can grow a lot of crops under these things. Sheep, of course, if they're grazing on grass, they just take. You don't have to worry about any kind of equipment going in there. If you're growing potatoes, that might be an issue, but if you're growing hay, it is.
Well, goats aren't a good idea because they climb all over the array.
Yeah, goats are acknowledged not to be good, and cattle are not good because they try to push it over. And sometimes I imagine they would succeed. Okay,
there's a takeaway from the article.
Yeah.
Is it time to go solar? The answer is always yes.
Always yes.
Going solar makes financial sense.
Yes. Okay, I'm
going to take into account the climate catastrophe we're facing. It's just the right thing to do.
Yeah. We're up to Saturday, September 4th, and we have a picture of NREL's Flatiron campus. NREL is National Renewable Energy Laboratory. This is in Colorado. And, I can I would bet that's a nice place to work.
Well, it looks like they're just starting up there. They've just moved there. And right now they've only got one turbine.
No, they've got more now. They actually
do. They do, but in the picture they do.
In the picture,
see where they're putting the photovoltaic. That's far from complete. That's in the lower left corner.
Yeah, actually, there is a turbine way in the background on the left.
Yeah, but it's tiny.
It's tiny, yeah. Okay, but I know that there's this picture, I believe, was taken from the top of a turbine.
It probably was.
They have two turbines that are together.
They're intending basically to create a laboratory.
Yeah, well, this is a laboratory, absolutely. Okay, this is from Clean Technica. What do you have for a title?
Hybrid power plants and flexibility. The future of the grid.
Yeah.
And I had to figure out what they meant by hybrid, and it's solar plus wind.
Yeah, anything where you're combining two, you could have solar plus hydro,
Well, in this particular case, they mean specifically solar plus wind.
Yeah.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Imagine an electric grid powered by clean energy. Now, imagine that it has all the comfort and convenience consumers expect, as well as grid reliability and resiliency services that are similar to or better than conventional plants. That is the power promise of the Flex Power project. And Tom, I looked at this and I started thinking about the quality of the electricity. People don't think about quality of electricity very much, but if you've got solar and batteries, you put batteries into this, the battery's response time is shorter than a single cycle in the AC power system.
It's instant.
It's a thousandth of a second. The moment your computer says, we need more comes. And that means that the quality of the actual quality of the electric supply is better. And one thing that we don't see with solar and wind and things like that is the price of electricity jumping from $69 per megawatt hour to $13,000 per megawatt hour. And I have seen that. And that happened
with these load peaking plants that they have, they're very expensive to run.
Yes, they are. But the thing is, when a grid depends on a coal burning or whatever baseload power plant, and the power plant trips, you got to get the electricity from somewhere, and people wind up unbelievable $13,000 per megawatt hour. I mean, that's like $1.30.
That's called extortion.
Well, it is, and actually, that happened in Australia, which means it was actually $10,000 per megawatt hour. But they have a law now after that happened, saying that that figure could not be exceeded. Not that I think it'll do any good to try to maintain that law. Tom, we should probably move on unless you.
Well, the article mentions hybrid solar plus wind. And one of the reasons why it works so well is because of the complementary nature of wind and PV.
Yeah.
I mean, you get your wind at night when the PV isn't working, and you get your best PV in a day when there isn't much wind.
And you get the best, the greatest amount of solar during the summer and the greatest amount of wind during the winter. It's complementary. Very complementary system. Okay, our next item here is a Ford Mustang Mach-E picture. An item
There's no grill on that car, is there?
No grill. Yeah, this is from Clean Technica. And what do you have for title?
Ford Mustang Mach-E sets 3 Guinness World Records in the UK.
Oh, man. It is 1,407 kilometers, which is 874 miles, from John O'Groats in the northern tip of Scotland to Land's End in Cornwall. A Ford Mustang Mach-E set a Guinness World Record for electric cars by averaging over 6.5 miles per kilowatt hour in that distance. The previous record was 1.8. They beat that 1.8 record by going to 6.5. And the previous record was set in a Tesla. They stopped once in 874 miles. They stopped once to get recharged.
To get recharged, and they did it real quick.
Yeah, they did. Absolutely.
They also set 2 more records the shortest total charging time.
Oh, yeah.
The least number of charging events.
Yes. Okay, we should probably move on. We're falling behind a little bit, Tom.
Well, let's take a look at some solar panels there.
Yeah, over some motorcycles. This is from...
I was looking at that. They're all motorcycles.
Yeah. This is from ndtv.com, and that is in India.
India can produce 1,000 gigawatts of solar energy on 0.5% of its land.
1,000 gigawatts. And what's a big? Wow, explain a gigawatt, would you, Tom?
Bigawatt, baby. A gigawatt is a bigawatt.
This is a lot of electricity. This is the equivalent of about 200 nuclear power plants, I guess. In a talk.
Well, this is 1,000 gigawatts.
Yeah.
And they're saying 100 gigawatts is over a fifth of the government's target of 450 gigawatts.
Yeah.
So they're talking about a lot
of electricity. And this is on 0.5% of the land, and most of it would be desert. In a talk to the International Climate Summit 2021, industrialist Mukesh Ambani outlined a roadmap for a new energy business, calling it, quote, the next big value creation engine, end quote, for Reliance and India. He said Reliance Industries would establish and enable at least 100 gigawatts of solar energy by 2030. So his one business is going to put up to 100 gigawatts of solar power.
This guy Ambani knows what he's doing.
I think he does.
He's got a plan to build up 4 gigafactories, one to make photovoltaic, another one to make solar batteries, another one to make electrolyzers for the production of green hydrogen.
Yep.
And a fuel cell factory. I mean, all these things complement each other.
Yeah, they do. They do indeed. Okay, we're up to Sunday, September 5th, and we have a picture here of the Long Island Expressway. But the article is really about New York City.
Well, I tell you, you'd have a hard time navigating that part of the expressway.
Oh, man. Well, you see all those cars and trucks are as far to the left as they possibly can, which means that in reality they're on the right side of the road as far as over as they possibly can, because they'd get stuck permanently if they got into that deep water.
Yeah, they can't move. They're gonna have to walk home.
Yeah, that's right. Which for some of those people would be enough to make their feet very sore.
Well,
So
this is called The Truth. New York City cannot avoid.
right. And it's from CNN. 4 days after it hit New Orleans, at least 13 New Yorkers died when Hurricane Ida's remnants hit the Big Apple more than 1,300 miles away from where it hit in New Orleans. So far, New York City has had more fatalities reported than all of Louisiana. Climate change is scrambling all of our assumptions about weather, resiliency, and emergency preparedness.
Well, there's a video on this website that we've mentioned already.
Yeah.
The Queens, New York floodwaters forced bus riders to stand on their seats.
Yes. And that's not, I mean, I've never known anybody who had to do that. When they had that big
There's a picture there. They're doing it.
Yes. When they had that power outage in New York City in 1966, I think it was 65.
I remember that well.
Yeah. I was at Pratt Institute at that time, and I had classmates who were I had a couple of classmates who were in a subway under the East River when that happened.
Ooh.
And they were in that subway for hours. And then somebody came along and said they could walk out on the subway tracks.
I remember that well. When the lights went out, I was in a department store looking at shoes.
Oh.
And each of the shoes had this little, how would you say it? It had a sticker in the sole of the shoe that was I can't even think of the word for it. It absorbed light and, and
it was for identification.
What I'm trying to say is I'm looking at a whole bunch of shoes and all I can see is these little lights coming out of each shoe.
Oh, man.
It was the labels, that
yeah.
I'm trying to think of the word for them, but they were
fluorescent.
Well, they would glow in the dark.
It would be either fluorescent or phosphorescent.
Yeah.
Fluorescent would imply black lights. I guess they would be phosphorescent.
Yeah, they were phosphorescent.
Yeah, I used to make fluorescent.
Glow in the dark.
I used to make fluorescent pigments and phosphorescent pigments in a
The
chemical
fatalities in New York, as we already said, exceeded the number of deaths reported in Louisiana.
Yeah, it was very sad. And
most of the victims drowned in basement apartments that suddenly filled with water.
Suddenly. That must have been appallingly scary. Okay. Our next item is from CNN, and it has the picture that I think is the most nicest of the week. And Dave Pape, I don't know who he is, but he put this picture into the public domain, which means, ladies and gentlemen.
That's a great picture.
Yeah, it is. This picture belongs to you. Okay. And this is, as I said, from CNN.
Nearly 30% of 138,000 assessed species face extinction. Whoa.
Yeah, whoa is right. In its annual Red List update, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature warned that 28% of the 138,374 species identified on its survival watch list as under threat have now been moved to the more dangerous red list, meaning that they are at high risk of extinction. And there are a bunch of subspecies of tigers and species of tigers that fall into this group. And, there's other animals that, honestly, Tom, I think we're going to see species go extinct during this century that are not even endangered now.
I think you're right. I think it's pretty scary.
And the Audubon Society has said two of them, which are not considered endangered, are the American bald eagle and the Baltimore oriole. And, these are...
I haven't seen a Baltimore oriole in a long time.
I haven't either. But, I keep my eye out.
Who's the eagles?
I keep my eye out for monarch butterflies. And I got to tell you, when I was a kid, they were everywhere. You know, if you went through a summer day without seeing a monarch butterfly, you went through an unusual summer day. Today,
Well, you got a little garden, so you must notice their absence.
oh, yeah. Well, we actually have them come around. And of course, one of the nice things about Brattleboro is that people have a tendency to let milkweed grow because they want the butterflies to have the larvae to have food. But that's going to have to be done to save them if they can be saved at this point. We should probably move on again, Tom.
Well, a quick takeaway here. Habitat loss and degradation present more immediate threats than climate change.
Yes. Okay, our next picture is one of them.
That's a nice picture, yes.
It is, and that guy, I think, must be kneeling on a surfboard or something.
That's what it looks like. I'm trying to figure that one out. I enlarged the picture.
He's got
he's kneeling on a very large surfboard.
He's got a paddle.
And he's got a paddle.
Those things, in case you don't know, in the background, those are wind turbines.
Is that what they are?
I think that's the truth.
Oh, darned.
Yeah, and this particular item comes from The Guardian.
Gone with the wind. Why UK firms could miss out on an offshore boom.
Yeah, Boris Johnson set out plans to add 30 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity by 2030. The GMB trade union warned that the UK risks squandering a major economic benefit by allowing many of the components of its offshore wind boom to be made in Asia. And unfortunately, that's happening here too.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
You have more on that?
Well, almost 10 gigawatts of power is now being generated off the UK coast.
Yes.
But fewer than half of those offshore wind farms are built using UK parts.
Yes. There you go. And there's no reason why these things shouldn't be made in the UK or in the United States or whatever.
Well, that's the point of this whole article.
Yeah. And every time I think about this, I think about the fact that the city of Bogota, Colombia, ordered 702 electric buses in January, which they put great faith in because they already had 700 electric buses. And this was only a few months after Bloomberg did an inventory of U.S. electric buses and found that there were something like 650 of them in the entire country. Why is this country so far behind? So
I'm not going to answer that question.
Well, thank you. Okay, we should go on. We are a few minutes behind schedule.
Well, we got a good picture, some more picture of pollution.
Pollution. Yeah, and those ships are extremely polluting. And this is from Clean Technica.
Well, the title says it all. How to raise revenue quickly. End fossil fuel handouts.
This is an article that I think is very useful if you want to know about fossil fuel handouts. After a century of waste and mismanagement, the House Natural Resources Committee has released a budget proposal that would end a slew of harmful handouts to the fossil fuels industry, protect publicly owned resources, and raise significant new revenues for U.S. taxpayers. We are leasing oil land, for example, for rates as low as $1.50 per acre per year. What?
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, of course, the oil and gas companies don't need handouts, but they got good political power, so they've engineered it so that they get them.
Absolutely.
They're getting hidden subsidies to produce the very fuels that are driving climate change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they're making them a lot of money doing it, or at least they have in the past. Do you have more?
Well, as I already said, they're big companies. They got a lot of clout, and they've used their clout to get handouts that they don't need.
That's right. Okay, I'm going to take us up to the next one. This is a picture of a wind farm in
pictures of horses here.
in inner Mongolia. And for anybody who doesn't know, there is Inner Mongolia and Outer Mongolia. The country of Mongolia is Outer Mongolia. Inner Mongolia is the part of Mongolia.
Inner Mongolia is inside of China.
Inside of China. I think you're moving your microphone around or something, Tom.
I haven't moved it, but
oh, okay. It sounded a little muffled.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Okay.
Well, maybe my hand was covering it.
Might have been. China surprised the world. What? You there?
A decade of wind, solar, and nuclear in China shows clear scalability winners.
Yes. China surprised the world in 2020 as it deployed 72 gigawatts of wind energy, a world record for a single country, 48 gigawatts of solar capacity, over 50% more than the previous year, but not a record for China. Meanwhile, exactly 0 nuclear reactors were commissioned in the year. Why do you suppose that is?
Well, that's 120 gigawatts that they just hooked up there.
Yeah, it's a lot. And, so, the Chinese...
Well, 72 and 48 equals 120.
That's right. The Chinese have been pushing nuclear and, by the way, still coal even today. But they've been investing. They've been putting their money big time into wind and solar, and they have to figure out how to work transmission lines and storage. But they're doing it. So
that article shows you a picture of China's largest solar plus storage project. It is huge.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
This is a very, 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 very large array of solar.
Yeah. Okay. We should probably move on, Tom.
Let me give you a quote that's worth repeating.
Okay.
Wind and solar are going to be the primary providers of low carbon energy for the coming century. And as we electrify everything, the electrons will be coming mostly from the wind and sun.
Yes.
In an efficient, effective, and low-cost energy model that doesn't pollute or cause global warming.
Yes, that's it. Okay,
looks better.
We've got a picture of Joby's eVTOL aircraft from Joby Aviation.
Looking.
What's that?
It's an interesting looking little article there.
Yeah, it is. And this is from Clean
And
Tech.
that's real. That's real.
Yeah, they're testing this. This is not a computer simulation. What do you have for a title? NASA begins air taxi flight testing with Joby. Joby, of course, is the company that built that little aircraft. Yeah. NASA has begun flight testing with Joby Aviation's all-electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft at Joby's electric flight base near Big Sur, California. It is the first time that NASA will test an eVTOL aircraft as part of its Advanced Air Mobility National Campaign. The tests will run into September 10th, which is, by the way, tomorrow at this point. So do you have more on that?
Well, this is the future. This is the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. We're up to Tuesday.
50 years from now, maybe a little bit longer, you're going to see these things all over the place, and people won't have personal cars anymore.
Well, you might be right.
Or at least not so many of them.
I think that's true. Okay. We are up to Tuesday, September 7th, and we've got a picture of a ridiculous city that somebody proposed building.
It's interesting because I'm watching a movie about the future, which was done in 1968 or something. And the future they're talking about was like 1990. And their future is very different from our future.
Yes.
But the reason I'm mentioning it is in that picture, they got buildings that look just like this.
Oh, really? Well, maybe the architect plagiarized his designs. I shouldn't say that. He probably didn't. Okay, this is from CNN.
Well, plans for a $400 billion new city in the American desert are unveiled.
Now, when I said ridiculous, I think the idea of putting a $400 billion city in a desert is ridiculous. However, maybe I'm wrong. The cleanliness of Tokyo, the diversity of New York, and the social services of Stockholm, billionaire Mark Lohr has outlined his vision for a 5 million person, quote, new city in America, end quote, and appointed a world famous architect to design it. All he needs is a place to build it and $400 billion. Okay.
Well, he's talking about the desert because it's not that's about one of the few places left where there's available land.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, he's talking about like 25 square miles here.
Yeah. Which is, I don't know.
250 square miles.
That's, yeah. Okay.
I'm wrong about the 25. 250.
Okay. I'm having a little.
That's like 50 miles on a
250?
I've lost you. 250 square mile metropolis.
It's 5 by 50.
That's what
It's 10 by 25.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay. So now we're going to go to CNN and talk about John Kerry and his mission to China, which could have gone better.
But before we go, on this link, there's a video that's called A Short History of the World's Tallest Buildings, which is very interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
And I grew up in New York City where the Empire State Building was, and for years and years and years, it was the tallest building in the world.
Yeah, for years.
Now, this guy in Dubai has now built a building that's twice the height of the Empire State Building.
I'll tell you, when I hear about things like that, I feel scandalized. Nobody should be allowed to build a building taller than the Empire State Building. This was a given in my childhood. Was the Empire State Building was the tallest building, and the implication, of course, was it was always going to be the tallest building. Okay, you got
a good point there. You know, in Washington, D.C., you can't build a building that's taller than the Capitol.
That's correct. Yes. And, you go through D.C. and you're not in New York City. Okay, we have an item from CNN.
Yeah, nice picture there of John Kerry.
Yes, in a video conference, and he's looking at himself. Okay, what do you got for a title?
Well, why he's there is he is the U.S. climate envoy.
Yes.
And in this particular case, he's talking to the Chinese, and he's not getting anywhere.
Well,
and the article is said, U.S. and China can't get along, even if the planet's future is at stake.
Yes, despite facing a common threat, China and the United States, the world's biggest greenhouse gas emitters, are still at odds on climate action. U.S. climate officials tried to separate climate issues from differences on other topics. Chinese officials would not allow that. And, Tom, quite frankly, considering that Donald Trump declared a trade war on China, I really can understand the Chinese doing this. I know that sounds horrible, and I don't know what is going through their minds, but it's true. And I should point out, by the way, that when Donald Trump declared a trade war, it looked like we could have won a trade war because, after all, we were Europe's biggest trading partner. And Europe is, I think, the third largest trading bloc in the world, maybe the second. But when Donald Trump left office, China was Europe's biggest trading partner. And so I would have to say that they so far have won that war.
It wasn't a good economic decision.
No, well, if he had said, we're going to declare the trade war, which I think was a bad idea anyway, but then went out and got all of our trading partners and said, we're going to cut you a great deal, a deal that you're just going to feel good about. But instead, he went out and said, you have to give us more money. And that just drove them to China. It was not a smart thing to do. But I've pontificated enough on that, and I think we should go on unless you've got more.
No, we got a nice picture of a wildfire.
Yes, I don't know.
It looks pretty wild to me.
It looks pretty wild, and in this case, it is an article from Technology Times.
climate change fight will be 6 times more costly.
A study by an international team of scientists published in the journal Environmental Research Letters found that the economic damage from climate change could be 6 times higher by the end of this century than previously estimated. Early analysis ignored a bunch of important risks. And I have to say, I find this very easy to believe, considering that we have had disasters in 2020 and 2021 that I wasn't expecting to see until 2035.
They ignored these things completely.
Well, that is a problem. Do you have more on this?
I don't think so.
Okay, let's go up to Wednesday, September 8th.
What are those funny looking things?
I think we've seen these before. It's hard to think, but you know.
It's hard to realize how big those things are.
Oh, they're unbelievable.
They're like 6 footballs. The biggest ones now are 6 football fields tall.
Yeah. Yeah.
These are huge.
We have wind turbines that have blades that are longer than a football field with its end zones. Okay, this is from...
Looking at those nacelles, I've seen a picture of one of those nacelles, and it was big enough to put in 2 city buses.
I believe it. The biggest ones, I think you could do more than that.
The biggest ones are bigger than that, sure.
Yeah.
They're up to, what, 14 megawatts now?
I think I think the biggest one was 16, just came out from Goldwind's.
That's pretty big, baby.
It's unbelievable. Okay, we're talking about an article from CNN. Yeah, 14 gigawatts was from General Electric. They had a 12 gigawatt machine and they upgraded it.
Yeah.
This is from CNN.
Well, environmental groups ask Congress to fund billions of dollars in climate measures in reconciliation. As
Democratic lawmakers begin crafting a $3.5 trillion reconciliation package, a budget reconciliation, a coalition of prominent environmental groups is asking them to include between $577 billion and $746 billion for key climate provisions. And honestly, I think we should be going a lot farther than that. I know that sounds weird, but there it is.
I think we should, but they got to deal with Republicans, you know?
Well, yeah, they have to deal with the fact that we've got a Citizens United problem.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go on, Tom, if that's all right, unless you've got more on that one.
Okay by me.
Okay, here is
nice picture here of a fire.
Yeah, I have no idea whether those buildings burned down or not. I've noticed that the electricity seems to be on in them. Either that or they've got emergency lights on. And the people
I think that's what it is. Yep.
People between them look like they're just looking, so they're not
standing
running.
there looking at the fire.
Yeah, they're not running away yet. And as I said, this is from CNN. What do you have for a title?
The Biden administration asks for billions in urgent disaster and refugee funding in a request to keep the government running.
Right. The Biden administration...
There's a good video in this article called... Pardon?
I'm sorry, you were...
The Biden administration is asking for billions in disaster aid.
You said something about a good video.
And there's an article, there's a video here, and this article says why scientists blame climate crisis for extreme weather. It's only 2.5 minutes, and it's a good video.
Yeah. This is not rocket science. It's not hard to follow the reason why the disasters that we're seeing are blamed partly on climate change. The Biden administration is asking for billions of dollars for, quote, urgent, unquote, extreme weather recovery efforts and resettlement of Afghan refugees in its proposal to keep the government funded past September 30th.
Well, this is all they're asking for this, and the Republicans in Congress are fighting it. So it remains to be seen what they actually get.
Well, we'll see what happens.
Well, let's move along here. We got another fine picture of some wind turbines in the background, and it looks like some surf fishermen on the beach.
Well, they might be clam diggers.
No, they're standing up.
Oh, okay. I thought clam diggers used tools that were kind of like rakes. But anyway, this is from Renews. And this, by the way, is our last article. And I have
Energy and BW Offshore unveils Scott wind plans. And BW is Bergson Worldwide. It's an Oslo-based offshore oil rig operator.
Oslo-based?
Oslo, Norway.
Yeah. And the Norwegians have made scads of money on offshore oil, and now they've got technology that they can use from that for putting in offshore wind turbines. Invenergy and BW Offshore have announced a joint venture for this is incredible to develop up to 5,400 megawatts. That is 5.4 gigawatts.
Megawatts.
Yeah, that's right. Of offshore wind power as part of the first ScotWind leasing round. The joint venture will focus on developing both floating and fixed foundation offshore wind projects off the northeast coast of Scotland. Now, these 5.4 gigawatts of offshore wind power are going to be in an area of the ocean where they could be operating at capacity factors that are upwards of 50%. Which means that they could be on average delivering about 2.7 gigawatts of electricity, where if you put say 4 gigawatts of natural gas plants, they might deliver less than that. And if you had, I'm going to say probably if you had 3 large nuclear power plants, I would expect them to deliver less than that. So this is a huge effort. This is a huge.
This is big. They call it ScotWind, and it's a part of the North Sea that has not been developed for wind yet. And it's a combination of anchored to the ocean floor and floating.
Yes,
there's going to be a pretty big array.
Yes, and interestingly enough, Scotland's already got huge amounts of natural resources tapped for electricity and is supplying.
Scotland's doing pretty well.
Yeah, it's supplying electricity to England, and it's going to be, I believe it actually is already tied to Norway.
They are. They've connected it with an undersea cable.
Yeah, and they have the ability to provide enough power for themselves with power left over. So
it's interesting that Norway is generating power offshore and they're not using any of it.
Well, they're getting almost all their electricity from hydropower.
Exactly. So they're able to sell this offshore power.
Absolutely. And it's, and who do they sell it to? They don't sell it to Scotland. They could sell it through Scotland to England. They sell it to Germany. They sell it to Belgium.
They're selling it to the European Union, right?
Yeah, they're selling it all over the place. And the transmission lines that we have now are a little different than they were 50 years ago. So there you have it.
Well, they're all undersea now. At least
yeah. I did a little research on transmission line losses several years ago, and I found that about 1985, they were lower than 10% per 1,000 miles, which according to the government was good enough to sell electricity competitively at distances of 2,500 miles. And within 10 years, that 9.5% had dropped to 5.5%.
Well, high voltage DC is very efficient.
Very efficient.
It doesn't have much in the way of losses at all.
Yeah, and so you could sell electricity to places 4,000 miles away. But since then, it has dropped to below 3%. And we're talking about a situation, and I've mentioned this before, you could generate electricity practically anywhere on Earth. And if you had the electric lines going to another place as far away as you could be, you could deliver it's doable. Exactly. Okay, Tom, we're up to the end of our project for this week.
We've had some pretty good stuff to talk about.
Yep, we are wishing everyone to have an absolutely awesome week. And I can tell you, everybody out there who's watching, I am waving goodbye, and
I am waving goodbye too.
And we are both absolutely truthful, so you know it's true. How about that? Come back next time.
Y'all come back and see us now, you hear?